All right. Well, I am going to go ahead and get started in the interest of time because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for the great program that we have for you all today. I'm Stacy Heilman. I'm the Associate Vice Chair for Research in Department of Pediatrics, and I also am co-director of the K Club. And so today, before I introduce our speaker, I'm going to give you all just a little bit of background and information and housekeeping on K Club and a couple of other things that might be of interest to you. All right, so first of all, as many of you who are frequent K Clubbers know, we always have a survey that we send at the end of the K Club. And we really crave your feedback and want to know what you all thought about the K Club, where it hit the mark, where you want to hear more of in the future, and that sort of thing. And so to incentivize your responses, which we really desire, we offer you the chance to win this exclusive K Club water bottle, supporting researcher career development since 2009. So Barbara Kilborn has the people who responded to the survey last month. She put them in the Crown Royale bag, and she's going to draw a name out, and we're going to find out who won the K Club water bottle this month.
Right, and the winner is Patricia Bush.
Patricia, yay, we're so happy. Thank you, Patricia, for, go ahead.
She should be here today. She registered.
Okay, great. Well, congratulations, Patricia. And the rest of you, you too can be in the running to win this exclusive K Club water bottle. So please respond to the survey at the end of today. It should only literally take about 30 seconds of your time. So we really appreciate your feedback. And we're getting ready to organize the programming for the fall. So we'd love to hear your feedback about what you want to hear more about. Something that we like to do at K Club is just give a couple of K Club specials, maybe some different funding opportunities that might be of particular importance to emerging scientists. So here's one, the Gerber Foundation Novice Research Award. It's one to support mentor child health research projects from physicians, PhD candidates, and the like. Just a little bit of money. It's more like a pilot, but that deadline is upcoming. And just one more that I wanted to highlight for you today is an early stage investigator research award using non-human primate models. So it is very specific to non-human primate, but one of the reasons that I really like it is it levels the playing field, and it's just early stage investigators competing with one another. And typically, I don't know for sure in this case, but typically they have a more generous pay line for new early stage investigators. So it may be that they are going to be able to fund more. I also wanted to tell you just a little bit. So when we had our 100th episode, K Club episode back in February, we talked a little bit about the publication that we had that was born out of K Club. And that is, I have the reference up here. It was published in the Journal of Investigative Medicine in March. And the title was Participant Perspectives on a Seminar-Based Research Career Development Program and Its Role in Career Independence. And we have all of our authors up there. The Georgia CTSA was tremendous in helping us run the focus groups and writing the publication. And we were really proud of this body of work because what it did is it, like I said with the survey, it reached out to you all and asked you all what you like about K Club and what maybe would be even better for career development. And so I highlight here two of the findings. One is that a broad-reaching K Club style educational seminar can serve as a valuable foundation supporting professional development. So that was one of our main key findings. Further, the addition of tailored programs delivered across diverse platforms are predicted to heighten career development success. So K Club, because we're so broad and we really just provide an opportunity for us to interact and do some peer to near peer mentoring and get to know each other, particularly when we're in person. But I think even to some extent over Zoom, it really does want to bring people together and provide sort of this overarching information about career development and grant writing. But it can only go so far because it doesn't have that tailored support. There are a lot of programs at Emory that will provide that tailored support, and the Georgia CTSA. And in fact, today we invited Dr. Kimby Hagan here to just tell us ever so briefly about one of those programs. So Kimby, would you like to take it over from here?
Yes, there are two, one that exists now, one that's in development, NIH R-level grant writing courses available that are quite intensive. The name of them both is Planning for Success. They are almost year-long, 10 months of monthly 2-hour online meetings with work that's done in between them that's intended to help applicants who get an NIH R-level application ready for submission the following fall. For instance, the next series of meetings will begin in winter 2021. People who participate in that will have an R-level, an R01, R21, R36 application ready for submission in fall 2022. The CFAR, who is a co-founder of the K Club, has one that's been going on for a while that is very specific to people who are doing HIV/AIDS research. We're in the process of developing a mirror image of it for people who are looking at sex as a biological variable as a component piece, like as one of the specific aims within their project. Does not have to do with HIV/AIDS. It's any research question in for which that's a specific aim. If you've got questions about this, if you're interested in it, please just reach out to me by email and I'll talk to you in depth on your own. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Kimmy, for joining us today to tell us a little bit about this really tailored program. So now I'm going to turn it to today's topic, Grant Writing 101, the nuts and bolts. And I'm really pleased to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Fitzpatrick, who is a tenured professor of pediatrics and nursing and directs the asthma clinical research program in the Department of Pediatrics. Her research program is focused on predictors of disease severity and personalized treatment for children with asthma. She has served as the principal investigator on 4 R01 awards and is the site principal investigator on 2 U01 awards and 2 U10 awards. She's also the recipient of a coveted K24 Mentoring Award, which is really indicative of the fact that she takes mentoring extremely seriously. Dr. Fitzpatrick is what I like to refer to as the total package. She is not only an excellent researcher and a dedicated mentor, but she is also a really great communicator and an all-around wonderful person, and I'm so pleased to invite her today. And she has told us previously that she really wants to try to emulate that in-person interaction that we are so missing these days. So please feel free to if you have a question, either put the question in chat or just say you have a question and we can pause and you can unmute yourself and answer, and she can entertain questions all along the way. So thank you so much. And I will turn it over to Dr. Fitzpatrick.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen and get us started. All right, so today we're going to talk about writing your grant, and I'm going to talk about different kinds of grants, but it's really one seminar. We're going to speak a little bit about planning the grant, and then when we talk about writing the grant, I'm going to focus primarily on drafting the specific aims page. We're going to spend most of our time here just because that is one of the most important pieces of the grant. We'll end with just a few tips for the research strategy. And I also want to emphasize that these slides are formatted for NIH grants, but really the information can apply to all grants. So whether it's NSF or other agencies. And I want to emphasize there's a lot of information here. Don't worry about taking notes. I'm going to send these slides to Barbara when we're done, and those can be handed out upon request. So don't feel like you need to write everything down. I also want you guys to have your phones handy. And so this is the only way to keep this really interesting. So if you do have your phone, go ahead and text FITZ, F-I-T-Z 703 to 22333. So type 22333, just like you're going to send a text message to that person, and then type FITZ 703. And I'm just curious about the people on the call. Tell me about your grant status. How many of you have never submitted not funded, submitted funded internally, or submitted funded by a foundation or NIH? So once you're ready to do that, just go ahead and type your responses. Hopefully they will start showing up. Let me just test it real quick. Okay, someone's never submitted. Anybody else? Okay, we've got 2 people. All right, so about, oh, some more votes are still coming in. And so far, so good. So about half the people on this call have actually submitted a grant before. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the question for the people that submitted a grant that was funded. Oh, it keeps going up. How many months did it take you to prepare for that grant? So there should be a raise hand feature somewhere on here. I'm not able to see it because I'm presenting. But if you can't see that feature and someone just wants to let me know how long it took you, does someone want to share?
I can share. This is Jocelyn. It took probably 4 to 6 months.
4 to 6 months. So that was actually pretty fast. It's pretty good. So I would say the most common mistake that people make when they write their first grant is not allowing enough time. And there are different metrics out there, but this is one that I put together with another group. And typically you want to start thinking about your grant somewhere between 12 and 7 months before it's due. And so in this phase, you're assessing yourself, your field, the idea, you're drafting specific aims, you're trying to figure out what the funding mechanisms are. And a lot of people were encouraged that you start writing your grant at least 6 months before the deadline. So for Jocelyn to be in the 4 to 6 months, that was a pretty fast grant. But anyway, this is just a general piece of advice. So next slide. So planning the rough concept. So the first thing you want to do, remember, if you're writing an NIH grant, this is the National Institutes of Health. So they're really interested in research that connects to patients. It doesn't necessarily mean it's patient-oriented research, but some type of research that has a clear connection to ultimately what we know about taking care of patients or a public health impact. And so as you're thinking about your grant, these are just a series of questions that you can ask yourself. And, is the project a new idea that follows from your ongoing work? So is there some kind of logical progression? Did you have an F-31 and now you're perhaps writing an F-32 grant? Or are you coming off of a K and you're thinking about an R? So these are some of the questions. And how many people out there are familiar with this website called NIH Reporter? I wish I could see you guys. I can see a little bit of you. Any raised hands? Anybody who's gone to NIH Report? Someone's raised their hand. Okay, great. So let me show you what this is and why you want to do it. So first of all, NIH is not allowed to fund research that duplicates existing research that's already funded. Your research has to be different in some way. You cannot write and get funded an identical grant. So if you actually go to this website, and let me show you what that looks like. The website looks like this, so reporter.nih.gov. And let's say you're interested in NHLBI K23 grants on chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So you can actually just type something like that, and then you'll see a list of all the grants that have been funded focused on this mechanism, K23, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease by this particular institute, which in this case is NHLBI. So it's sometimes really helpful to just see what other people are doing. So for instance, this grant, someone's looking at electronic cigarette use. And if you actually click on the grant, you can see the abstract text. You can see in many of these cases what their specific aims are, and you can get details about it. For instance, the institutions, if you keep scrolling down, you even can get a sense of what the costs are. So this website can actually be really helpful to you, particularly when you're planning those grants. And what you're going to do here is you're going to make sure that your project at least brings 2 to 3 new aspects to the field. So it's okay if you want to study e-cigarettes and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. You just want to make sure what you're doing is a little bit different. So that's where the NIH Reporter website can be helpful, and also gives you an idea of what the institutes are interested in.
Dr. Fitzpatrick, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So let's say that's a grant got funded like 10 years ago that does something similar to what you want to study, but like the work never got published based off of that grant. Does the NIH take that into consideration? Or if they funded it, then they've said they funded it and they aren't going to fund it again?
Oh, 10 years ago is a long time.
Right,
We
exactly.
probably wouldn't even know, to be honest, just based on this new search mechanism, because with NIH Reporter, it only goes back a certain number of years. So
Okay.
chances are they probably wouldn't know, but I think if someone who was reviewing your grant was familiar that someone else tried to do this and never published, the question is why? Is there a fatal flaw? And you have to be really careful about that. So I also, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just said thank you.
Oh, okay, sorry. So the other question is, does the project align with NIH Institute strategic plans? And the other question for those of you that have had NIH funding, how many of you actually know the strategic plan of your particular institute? Any hands? No one? Okay, so let me show you something else, because this is another good tip. And I may have to, okay, let's do it this way. So I'm going to search NIDDK strategic plan. Guess what? Every institute has a strategic plan. So for the example of NIDDK, they're actually, can you guys see this? It says now in development. They're actually developing their newest strategic plan, but they have a number of other interesting documents. So there's one here called Recent Advances and Emerging Opportunities. So you want to pay very close attention to when your institute actually issues these types of documents, because in these, they're going to have a series of key questions. These are things they want. These are what all the RFAs you see from the Institute are going to be based on, are these strategic plan documents. So sometimes as a strategy, you can reference these strategic plans in your specific aims of your grant to try to really get the reviewers and institutes' attention. So let's go back to here. So the other thing is there's all kinds of grant mechanisms out there. And one thing that's really helpful is if there's a specific request for the type of research you're doing. And how do you know if there's a request? Well, there's actually a website that lists all the weekly funding opportunities and notices, and I've listed it here. How many of you get that weekly email from NIH with all? I know Stacy does and Barbara does because I get your emails, but Jocelyn gets it. I can't see all of you. I wish I could. So anyway, what does it look like? So let me make you dizzy one more time and show you what that looks like. So that website actually looks like this. It's the NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts. And if you go to this hyperlink, it's going to list general notices. These are usually policy things. It's going to list funding opportunities and changes to funding opportunities. This can be really helpful too. Notices of intent to publish. So they're not ready to issue the RFA yet, but they're thinking about it. So pay attention to those. What are really important for you guys are what Stacy showed at the beginning of this, notices of special interest. If you're thinking about an R01, here's one related to the HEAL initiative. So limited competition to support mentorship of junior investigators. This is like a quasi K24 type of mechanism, but it's unique to the HEAL initiative. So anytime you see an NOSI, notice of special interest, they are begging you for those grants, even more so than just a traditional request for application. So these will be emailed to you every Friday. If you want to go to that website and sign up, I highly encourage you to do that. And going back to the slide, so you've done all these things, you're getting through the planning phase, and you've checked all these boxes. Now is the time to start thinking about your specific aims page. And this is what I'm going to focus the most on with you guys this afternoon, because this is actually the page of the grant that every reviewer in the study section sees. So not just your 3 or 4 assigned reviewers, but every single person on that study section will see your specific aims page. So a lot of people say it's the most important page. So how do you do that? Well, what a lot of people don't understand is that scientific writing is very formulaic, and people that write really excellent grants almost always follow a template. And I've listed you in the slides that are here and are following this, what that template is. So in the introductory paragraph, the very first sentence that you're going to write is what's known as the hook. It conveys the importance of the research and why it's critical to do it. The next couple of sentences are what is known about the field. After that, you're going to discuss the gap in knowledge, and then you're going to end with the critical need. It's the knowledge you propose to develop and why you should specifically be funded. So we're going to go through some examples of this just to give you guys the picture of this is a template. Like there's really not a lot of art to this first paragraph of the grant. So there's a couple examples. This one is from a website I found. It's a little bit more basic in orientation, but just take a minute to read this to yourselves. And let me see if I can see you guys. When you're done, just give me a thumbs up. Okay, I see at least one thumbs up. All right, got a few. Okay, so let me pick on someone. Oops, I didn't mean to show you that. Okay, so someone want to take a stab at what the gap is? So if you'll just unmute yourself and blurt out because I can't see everyone. Um, who wants to tell me where they list the gap? So the hook is always the first sentence, so that's actually too easy. So I was going to try to make it a little more difficult, and if someone wants to point to me where the gap is. So what's the gap in knowledge?
Is it the sentence that starts with, although the tax oncoprotein has been, and then the mechanism by which tax transforms cell is not well understood?
Perfect. That's exactly right. So remember, the hook is always your first sentence. It's the sentence you're going to try to draw in your reader. Like, wow, viruses, these are really important in cancer. I didn't know that. And then the gap is always, it typically says something like, this is not understood. And then you're going to end that first paragraph with what's the critical need. And they're talking here about a major obstacle in the field. So great job with that. I'm going to give you another example. This is from one of my R01 grants. This is just a stylistic thing. I always like to have a little bit more white space. And so what I will often do is split apart that first paragraph. Again, this is just style, but the same elements are still there. So this is a grant focused on young preschool children with wheezing. And if we go to the next page, I'm really trying to hook you in here with some of the statistics about wheezing in preschool children. The gap is stated here towards the second paragraph. These biological mechanisms have not been properly studied and remain poorly understood. So you almost always see that, like not well understood, poorly understood. And then the critical need is how I end that. So you don't always have to have one paragraph. It can actually be split into two. And I also, we'll talk about K grants in a minute. I haven't shown you an example here, but I do show you an example later on. So the next paragraph, once you've introduced the gap in knowledge and the critical need, is the second paragraph, or in my case, it would be the third, but it's the next paragraph. And this is this part of the specific aims page where you're going to introduce the solution that fills in the gap in knowledge. There's a lot of stylistic flexibility here in this section, but you still address the following: the goal of the research, the objective, which is a brief description of how you're going to achieve that goal in your study. There should always be some type of overarching or central hypothesis you're going to test. And I would actually encourage you to also add your qualifications here. Remember, every reviewer in that room is going to see your specific aims page. They haven't all read your grant and won't all see your preliminary data. So if you can really focus them here on how qualified you are, that's a really good strategy. So let me show you an example. This goes back to that same example, which was talking about the viruses. So take a minute to read this, and I'll put you guys on the screen and give me a thumbs up when you've had a chance to read it.
I saw a couple of thumbs up.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wish I could see you all. It's a major limitation of Zoom. So someone want to take a stab at what the objective is here in this second paragraph of the grant? What is this person going to do? You can just unmute and blurt it out. It's fine.
I mean, they're trying to make a leukemia disease model in a rodent and make an improvement using this ROSA 26 locus to stop some of the problems that previous models have had.
Right, good. One thing about this example, so if you break it down, their overall goal here is to develop an innovative mouse model system. You can be very explicit in this second paragraph, and you can say our long-term goal is, my short-term goal is. You can really be bold about this. They spend a lot of time talking about their objectives, which are highlighted in yellow. And you really, really want to focus this paragraph on some type of hypothesis or overarching central hypothesis. And this example, it really isn't strongly stated. I think they could have done a lot better here, to be honest. And we'll talk a little bit more about hypothesis testing in a minute, but it's very, very critical that these research grants that you write do test some kind of hypothesis. NIH really is not interested in just exploratory research. So here's another example. Remember I told you guys could highlight your qualifications. So here's one from, again, this is the same preschool grant that I wrote. And this actually went in as a revision, and they had said in the first round of comments, you know, are you really qualified to do this research? And so when I went in with the revision, I just emphasized it on the specific aims page because clearly it wasn't well articulated in the prior version. So I just point out at the beginning what the expertise I have is and why I'm writing this study and what the gaps are. So in this example that I'm showing you here, our goal in my laboratory is to advance personalized medicine for children with respiratory disorders. That's our long-term goal. But our immediate objective to do that is to do this 50-week phenotype stratified cohort study. And then I always end, this is just my style, test the overarching hypothesis. And I just usually bold and highlight that and all kinds of things so the reviewer doesn't miss it. So what about a K grant? So Jocelyn Grunwell was gracious enough to share parts of her K23 with us today. And the reason I'm sharing a K grant is because when you have a K grant, the final product is you as an individual. It's a training grant and not a research grant. So with these K grants, I mean, Jocelyn's studying pediatric acute respiratory distress syndrome, also called PARDS. And her objective here is additional training in research methodology, and her research goal is stated here. So again, the objective for a K is actually you. The objective is for you to become an independent scientist studying, blah, 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 blah. So that's how a K is a little bit different, but most grants in the second paragraph do have this type of style. So let's see, this might be fun. So in one word, we're going to talk about the actual aims part of the specific aims page. And I want you guys in one word to tell me what you think makes a specific aim great. So if you've already joined, all you have to do is just read text, but if not, go ahead and text FITS 703 to that number. And we'll see what happens here in a minute. All right. So you're telling a story. It's focused, measurable. These are all great answers. Innovative.
And we are not actually seeing the words show up. Is there a way to refresh
Oh,
the
no.
page?
Hold on one second. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can show you here. That's too bad. This is one of those word clusters. Let me see if we can. I'm going to try to share it a different way. Let me see if this works. Okay, are you guys seeing this now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. It's my first time using this. So FITS 703 is clearly the one that doesn't belong, but these are great answers. So measure, like you can measure it. It's focused, has impact, storytelling, concise, feasible, specific. So these are all exactly right. And how do you do that in just a few sentences? And that's what we're going to talk about next. So. Okay. So we're actually now to the point, we're still on that first piece of paper. We're actually going to write down some aims. And these are going to describe how we are going to test the hypothesis or achieve the objective of the research. So typically there's 3, depending on the scope of the grant. Sometimes you'll see 2. Sometimes there'll be as many as 4 to 5, but almost all people typically will have 3. And I actually like that a lot of these words that are here showed up in our word cloud, but aims should be concise, they're testable, tied to a hypothesis. They're similar in scope, they're independent of one another, and we'll talk about that with an example. They have a clear endpoint, they're feasible, and they yield useful information regardless of the outcome. So this is the part that can be really, really hard, and you're going to spend hours and hours writing these aims and revising them and editing them, and that's just part of the process. So some people recommend in your aims using strong verbs that convey a clear endpoint. And there's examples here of what's considered a weak verb and what's considered a strong verb. And depending on the reference, some people may not perfectly agree on what's weak and strong, but typically verbs that are considered weak are those that say things like explore, investigate, characterize, describe, catalog. And the reason these are considered weak is because they're very descriptive. As opposed to some of these other verbs, quantify, define, assess, compare. The reason these verbs are considered strong is because it goes back to the hypothesis testing. You're usually, in this case, comparing multiple groups, quantifying something. So that's why people think these are stronger versus weaker. There are some features of poorly developed aims. Unacceptable aims are those where only one possible outcome is interesting, or the success of another aim is dependent on that outcome. I've got an example of that, so just bear with me. There's also fatally flawed aims, and these are those that are just, they're descriptive, they're unfocused, they're very obvious. You don't really need, funding to do them, or in some cases just completely uninterpretable. So let me show you some examples of what those are. So we're going to do another poll. So which of these do you think is the strongest specific aim? There's compare the function of protein X in disease A and disease B, determine if protein X plays a role in disease A, or identify protein X gene polymorphisms in biopsy tissues from a cohort of 20 patients with disease A. So you have to pick which one of these you like the best. And let me just show you, if you think example 1, you do A, example 2, B, example 3, C, and if you don't know, just put D. But let me go back just so you guys, so 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C, and whoops, I can't seem to get back. Okay, here we go. Can you guys still see this?
Yes, we can.
Oops, that okay. Okay, 1A, 2 is B, and 3 is C, and if you don't know, then that is D. And
And I think some people are putting their answers in chat.
oh, okay. So
We've got a vote for 2 votes for 3/C in chat. Do you see the results on the poll anywhere?
Yep.
Oh, good. What is it? We can't see.
You can't, oh darn, okay. Let me see. This is supposed to be integrated, so sorry about that. Poll anywhere, share. Okay. So a lot of people like C. Can someone tell me why they like C?
I liked C because it was much more detailed, and it gave me a better sense of what is going to be done to address that aim or to accomplish that aim.
So it's interesting. So I agree that it's actually very specific. You know what they're going to do. A lot of people would also argue there's a fundamental problem with AIM 3, which is that they're going to identify polymorphisms in only 20 patients. So the outcome, this actually might be one of those aims that's considered fatally flawed, where it's not enough patients to really answer the question. So I see the point, and I guess this was not the best teaching example just because so many people thought it was 3.
I have a question. Is it better to stay vague, like determine if protein X plays a role in disease A?
So the second specific aim is actually an example of an aim where there's only one outcome that's interesting. And so this would actually not be a very good aim, because if protein X does not play a role in that disease, well, you're done, right? You can't publish that. It's not very interesting. So some people would argue aim 1 is actually the strongest specific aim because you're comparing the function in 2 different disease states, and you're not asking whether or not it plays a role, but actually what does it do in this disease versus this disease. And so in this case, the outcome could be published regardless of, whether your hypothesis is met or not. So we'll practice more. Sorry, I thought this was going to be a little bit more clear of an example, but.
Well, and if I could just say, I think this is actually a great example, specifically number 3, more detail, like, there's that saying, if you can't wow them with substance, wow them with style. I think that's a good example. There's not much substance to number 3 because it's almost a fishing expedition.
Exactly. That's exactly what was intended in the example, but perhaps it didn't get conveyed as well. So it's kind of a trick question, but you're absolutely right. You're just not going to learn that much doing polymorphisms in 20 people.
But also I would just say, Anne, that number 1 reads as a specific aim, whereas number 3 reads as something one might do in order to accomplish her specific aims.
Sort of a method.
It's kind of what you were saying, is that it's not that there's anything wrong with number 3, it's just not a specific aim. It's not large enough to be a specific aim.
Right.
So.
Okay, well, I have some more examples. Maybe this will become a little bit more clear, but okay, so that's the slide that didn't work. Okay, interrelated aims. This one is really, really confusing to a lot of people. So let me walk you through an example. And this was actually published in Academic Emergency Medicine. So here's an example of a grant with 2 aims. The first aim is you're going to develop a new assay for disease A. And aim 2 is you're going to assess the prevalence of disease A in population X using this new assay. So why is this interrelated? Well, first of all, if you can't develop the new assay for disease A, the whole grant's doomed. So not only can you not do aim 1, but you can't do aim 2 either. So that's considered interrelated. And that's why interrelated aims are really, really viewed very negatively, because they're very, very risky. So in a different strategy, if you really wanted to develop a new assay for disease A, what you might do instead would be to, this is what the journal said, measure the utilization of the current assay, test 3 alternative methods to detect the condition in question, and pilot the test with the highest sensitivity for the condition. So in this way, you're going to generate knowledge regardless of the success. You can actually publish your aim 1 and publish your aim 2 without being so interrelated. So some other examples of aims, these are ones from my grant, and there's some experienced grant writers here, and maybe you don't like them, but they got reviewed well. So sometimes that happens too. But I'm starting off with a very strong verb, determine, not explore, but determine whether a wheezing phenotype, which is the clinical features of wheezing, predicts exacerbation occurrence. So that's my primary outcome. And aim 2, I'm determining whether wheezing phenotype predicts episode-free days and response to treatment with systemic corticosteroids. So why are these aims not related? And the reason is I've said up front, I'm going to establish a cohort study of preschool children with wheezing. These aims are actually very distinct. So the success of aim 2 is not dependent on the success of aim 1. They're completely different outcomes. Some people get confused and think because I'm proposing a cohort and I have 2 longitudinal aims that they're interrelated, but they're not. The cohort, if you're questioning my ability to establish a cohort, you're actually getting at my qualifications, which is again why I tried to highlight on the specific aims page that I can do this. And then aim 3 is refining the prediction models. So again, there's style involved here. I just wanted to share some examples with you. These are aims from Jocelyn's K23. Again, she's starting off with very strong verbs, determine the phenotype of these airway neutrophils, determine whether these neutrophils suppress T cell function, and determine whether these particular endotype phenotype clusters predict clinical outcomes. So as it was stated before, they're kind of broad, but at the same time they're testable and they're linked to a central hypothesis with sub-hypotheses underneath each aim. So the final statement in the specific aims page, again, at some point, many of you probably already run out of space, but I'm going to encourage you to actually make more space. And the reason is, I think a great specific aims page follows up after those aims with some type of sentence, whether it's a sentence, a small paragraph. But after you've written these aims, think about the innovation of the aims, the expected outcomes, if you haven't already stated that, and the impact. And so this is where I'm going to start linking my reviewers back to those NIH strategic plans and priorities. So here's an example, again, going back to that, that viral cancer example. And remember, this is the person, building this new mouse model. And after the aims, this person is saying this new mouse model is going to provide a valuable resource for the wider scientific community. So he's telling you, or she's telling you, these aims are important and this is what they're going to bring. And I actually do this as well. I take it a step further. So in this same grant that I've been sharing with you, is I'm highlighting initially, right after the aims, what the strategic plan is for my institute. And I'm telling you why it fits into the strategic plan. And then I go so far as to say, here's the 3 things that we're going to achieve from this study. So that's the impact statement. And actually, Jocelyn did that on her K-23 as well. So remember, a K-23 is a training grant. The product is you as an investigator. And her impact is that she's going to become an independently funded physician scientist striving to bring precision medicine to critically ill children with PARDS. So hopefully that makes sense, but I really do encourage you to free up white space, be more concise in your writing, and really end that aims page with an impact statement of some sort. And so here's a summary just of all the things we've talked about with specific aims. You start with the problem, you go on to address the knowledge gap or critical need, you come up with a solution. You should really always have some type of central hypothesis linking your whole grant together. From there, you write 3 or maybe more than 3 very specific aims. And if you can, end with expected outcomes and impact. And these should ultimately link back to the knowledge gap, and everything here is interrelated. So I'm going to do one more poll, okay? Let me show you guys on a different screen since that one doesn't work. That's the PowerPoint. Okay, are you seeing this? My understanding of specific aims is now.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see if this one works. I'm gonna have to share a different one. Hold on. Share.
I don't know about everybody else, but I got a error that poll does not support text messages responses.
Well, it probably thinks I did too much. So anyway, which is actually too bad. It would be nice to know. Oh, well, that was my last one. Okay, so maybe chat if people want to leave feedback there about what they think about specific aims, because there's going to be another session on grant writing. I believe it's next month. That would be really helpful if we know what you guys still feel really weak in, or what you think is redundant that you don't necessarily need more of. So let's get back. I just have a couple more slides to show you, and then I thought we would open it up for some discussion. So the research strategy, I'm not going to talk a lot about this. I just want to share with you that there's really 3 main sections: significance, innovation, and approach. And I wanted to share with you not as much about the nuts and bolts, but what the reviewers are asked to score you based on. So as a reviewer, you receive a piece of paper that tells you what to score on. And under significance, it has these bullet points. So does the project address an important problem? Is the prior research that serves as the key support rigorous? If the aims are achieved, how will scientific knowledge be improved? How will successful completion of the aims change basically the field? So if you've drafted a really strong specific aims page, the reviewers already are thinking good job to each of this question. It becomes very, very clear. But even still, you're going to have a small section on significance. And I really suggest bullet pointing these. So you might make a bullet point on critical barriers to progress and just list under that what you're going to do. Reviewers are also asked you to score you on innovation. And I know some of you thought that innovation was important in specific aims. And I'll tell you, it's actually very challenging to be innovative because these are the criteria that reviewers have to score you on. So are you changing clinical practice paradigms?
So the title of this
are you using novel concepts, methodologies, instrumentations? So, I mean, this can be pretty hard. And I'll be honest, grants get funded every day that don't necessarily score the best in innovation. So don't feel like it's the worst thing in the world if you get 1s and 2s on everything else and a 4 on innovation. Chances are you're still going to be funded. And that's almost always the story with me. I'm very rarely super innovative. But hopefully you can think about these things. When you think about the approach, these are also what the reviewers are going to score you on is the overall strategy, plans to address weaknesses, a robust and unbiased approach, potential problems, pitfalls, strategy to establish feasibility. And I also want to highlight this one. So have you presented adequate plans to address relevant biological variables such as sex? I think I have another slide on this, but sex as a biological variable is required to be addressed in all grants. And if you don't address it, that will take a perfect grant from a score of 1 to a score of 3. Like it's the kiss of death not to address it. So make sure you do. And also reviewers are asked to, even though you don't discuss human subjects under the approach, they are asked to consider the human subjects section in the score for your approach. So if you don't do a good job on that section, it can actually really, really make your grant poorly scored. So just some thoughts about preliminary data. They should be relevant. Don't put data in there that aren't relevant to the grant. If you can present evidence that you've conducted smaller scale feasibility studies, the data should show momentum over your training and career and show a good track record of productivity. So think about using your biosketch here as well, like show momentum, really discuss how you've gone from point A to point B. Don't let your co-investigators just appear in the biosketches. If you can, show working relationships with them through your preliminary data, publications if you can. And if you're working with a co-investigator and you didn't generate the data, don't say you did. That just sort of irritates people. There's no we if you're not on the paper, right? They did it, and just be clear about who generated what. And ultimately state how each result in your preliminary data impacts your proposal. Like what did you learn from it and what's your proposal going to do? So.
And I have a quick question about the last slide. So I get asked oftentimes, do you have to have publications with your mentor on a K grant before you submit it? And so generally speaking, I think it really, really helps, but I wondered as a K reviewer, what's your experience with that? Have you ever seen a K grant get funded that didn't have a publication with the mentee and the mentor?
Oh, I'd have to think really hard about that because that comment came up for one of my mentees. We submitted very early in her career, and we submitted with a strategy thinking we were going to go in, put a bunch of papers in the meantime, and COVID played a role in this decision making too. It can be commented on. I've seen it because it was commented, one of my mentees got nailed on that.
I think it really goes back to the best predictor of future behaviors, past behavior. So if you want to slam dunk and that this mentorship relationship is real, you want to do it. And if you don't have it in publications, you better have a whole lot of other evidence that you actually are working together.
Right. I do agree with that very much. This is my final slide. So match your methods to your aims. Kind of said this before, don't include stuff that's not relevant. remember, these aims are supposed to be measurable. And so you want to make sure that you have outcomes. What are your endpoints? What are your outcomes? How will those be measured? And what are the statistical tests you're going to do with those particular outcomes? Have a bullet point with pitfalls, alternative approaches. And I mentioned this before, but you have to discuss sex as a biological variable. There are study sections that will crucify you if you don't do this. So this is the verbiage. NIH expects that sex as a biological variable will be factored into research design, analyses, and reporting. So you've got to be really careful if you're proposing to use both sexes that you actually analyze them independently, just to make sure you understand the role of sex as a biological variable. So this was super fast, just meant to be an overview, but I thought we could end with some questions and discussions. And I'm going to actually take it off screen sharing so I can monitor some chat. There were really good questions along the way, but does anybody have anything else they want to share or experiences?
I have a question. You said usually it takes 9 to 12 months, I think you said, to write a grant. Do you have any estimate or just a guess that you can put into how many hours it takes to write a K grant?
Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, so remember, there's the mentee, but also the mentor. And when you add those two together, I mean, I bet I easily put 40 hours into my mentee's Ks. And so when you add that to what the mentee is doing, and then also remember all the people on the finance side and the RAS, and there are literally probably 50 people that touch your grant before it goes out the door. So it's huge. But you as the PI writing the grant, oh my gosh. Jocelyn, what do you think it took you?
A long time. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to quantify it.
So
Because it starts before you start writing.
It does. And so when I work with a mentee, what I do is I always am a big fan of reverse timelines. So I'll start backwards. When's the grant due? When's it due to the institution for routing? What needs to be done by this date, this date, this date? And so I put Jocelyn on a weekly plan. I can't even remember when we started it, but it was basically a series of weekly assignments that had to be done so that when we met once a week, we weren't waiting till the very last minute trying to scramble and do all the documents. And I think that really made her grant strong. She got almost a perfect score on the first try, which is largely due to she's great. But I mean, the grant itself was cohesive. There weren't errors. The sections were well developed. And so I do encourage you to reverse timeline and spend an enormous amount of time, because honestly, the science to me is only about 20% of the grant writing. It's all the other supporting stuff that takes forever, really. Especially if you have a clinical trial, you'll never want to write another one again. So,
Well, that brings us to time. I think, did anyone send you a question just in chat? Just
no, but I will send the slides. I'll clean up the polling and everybody can access those. Just please, you're welcome. It's a teaching tool, but please don't share them outside of Emory just because it's grant information, but they're free for you to look at. And if you guys want to read examples of grants, Stacy, I don't know if you have a folder of people that have been willing to share, but you're certainly welcome to mine. They're public information, so you're welcome to see them. So.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Fitzpatrick. We really appreciate it. And as you alluded to, next month, Dr. Jamie Rubin from Columbia is going to be coming and telling us more about grantsmanship to round out the spring semester of 2021 K Club. So thank you so much for a great presentation, and thanks for the interaction. And
thank
we'll
you.
See you all next month.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Thank you.